Today's video is going to be all about the Ghost of Yotei. Platinum the game. I played it with my wife. We actually did a little bit of co-op where she took a turn at the stick and then I played for a while. It was tons of fun and we had an absolute blast playing through it. This game took me about 85 hours to complete everything. Obviously, lowering it down for her on like an easier difficulty so she could work through some of the stuff. And then for me, maybe it was a bit of inflated time because it took her a little bit longer to work through some of the stuff, but we had an absolute blast playing together. I talked about the reward system where once you link your PlayStation account to the official store, you can buy some of the merchandise. So we'll definitely be picking up some of that to rep that, we beat this game, which was really a lot of fun. But today's video is a whole spoiler cast on it. So if you haven't played the game and you don't want anything spoiled, you don't want to know my thoughts on it, this is where I say goodbye to you. And come back later when you're done because I have a lot to say. I think this game teaches us a lot of very interesting lessons, and it definitely changed a lot of expectations that I had throughout the experience. But ultimately, very favorable impression of this game. I'm going to break it down into a couple key points where we could talk about that. We'll talk about the story stuff a little bit farther on down the road. But just ultimately as an overall review, the art style in this game, the graphics, the sound design, the feeling, the world atmosphere, the storytelling was all spot on. It was very, very, very well put together. I think the sense of exploration in this game was significantly ramped up than what we saw from Ghost of Tsushima. There was a lot of stuff that we missed that we had to go back and try to figure out when we got the shamisen songs to go back to each of the individual zones. Because even though we ran right past the fox den, if you weren't standing right next to it, you wouldn't know. And the map kind of still looked like it was complete, but there was still small pieces there. I feel like this is a game that every little nook and cranny held some sort of secret. And I appreciated the exploration because there was always a quest or a sword or something, some cosmetics, some mission, something to do. This is the antithesis of the bullshit Ubisoft games that we have with the ridiculous amount of bloat that is just no fun and nobody wants them anymore. Nobody plays those games. And that's just, it's the opposite of that. It's an open world, but it's an open world that matters. And I love that. I love that exploration and it kept me coming back. And I didn't set out on this game saying, I'm going to get the platinum. But I did set out in this game saying, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to get lost in the world and naturally just exploring and finding more things to do and getting missions and the quest hubs and all the bounties and everything. It led to me just wanting to see everything. And before I knew it, I hit the platinum. And I was like, how cool was that? But it wasn't like, I'm going to platinum this game before I even open it. It never felt like that. It never felt like a chore to me. And I think that's the kindest thing I could possibly say about a game, that a vibrant open world made me want to see it all. And it wasn't like a golden path like in Borderlands 4 or the bloat that we saw in Valhalla. It was actually a world that mattered. I think that was great. The weapons were phenomenal. The rock, paper, scissors type thing where some weapons are stronger to others, weaker to others. I love that. The skill tree felt impactful and powerful. When you mix the skill tree with the various charms that you got and the weapons that you used, I felt like in the armor, particularly the armor with some of those perks, you could play the game very, very differently. I was definitely the guy who walks into the town and wants to do the takedowns right away and have those big showdowns with everybody and just stand there in the middle of town and just fight and just destroy everything. My wife, a little bit more stealthy. She likes to take her time, kind of work her way through all the various pieces of content, being very slow, using the bow and arrow, using stealth to kind of work her way around. Both were very, very powerful tools. You can play however you wanted to, just like in Ghost of Tsushima, but obviously the armor and the kit that you had was very different. And because of that, we had two very different play styles. So it was fun to kind of see her do something different than the way I did. But I felt like there were so many cosmetics by the end with different pieces of armor, with different color schemes. There was like 5 or 6 different vendors that would sell you totally different pieces of dye. It was so much fun to just mix and match and come up with a play style that matched kind of the mood I was in. You know, did I want to look more tanky? Did I want to look more stealthy? Did I want to wear all red? Did I want to wear all white? Like, I felt like I could dress up, you know, that Elden Bling, so to speak. I really appreciated that. And there was, by the end, I mean, I think there's like 10 sets of armor, probably like 60 masks, headbands, hats, different types of sword. I was like, wow, an overwhelming amount of stuff. But again, the exploration allows you to do that. If you just golden path it, you're going to miss out on some of the best stuff. You're going to miss out on the really cool masks. You're going to miss out on the really cool armor sets if you just kind of golden path it. And I think that getting all that arsenal and then getting to use it in combat later on is exactly the carrot stick loop that I constantly talk about. I just did a video on Monster Hunter talking about how, you know, I feel like the end didn't justify the means. Here it does. It absolutely does. Very, very, very well done. And that meant a lot to me. But the thing that holds it all together, you know, when I look back on this game, you know, in 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, same way with Ghost of Tsushima, same thing. What am I going to remember? I'm going to remember the really cool mask? Am I going to remember the really cool armor? No. I'm going to remember the story and the emotional impact. I'm going to talk about those big moments. I'm going to talk about those big, you know, larger than life set book pieces when you're running out of the castle and bombs are going off and you're riding on your horse. I'm going to talk about the revenge of, you know, finally killing Lord Saito, you know, Atsu's journey. That's the stuff that's going to resonate with me. And that's the stuff that is going to mean the most to me. And those are kind of some of the notes that I have written here talking about some of those things that I thought were so impactful. The fact that Atsu was betrayed so hard, her revenge and her holding that hate in her heart. There were parts of me that initially was agitated with her. You know, obviously the snake is a tutorial boss. Onyo is the Oni is kind of the first boss that's menacing, right? You kind of systematically take this guy down. You have this epic fight. The church, or the castle's on fire. You know, you finally beat this guy down. You kill him. You find your long lost brother. The wolves are reunited. It's an impactful moment. The music swells up and it's like, oh wow, you know, like the wolves are back, baby. We're gonna do this together. And then Jubei peels off and you're on own again. Then you meet Kitsune and you find out Kitsune is actually Lady Onyo and she's your friend. And wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to kill you. You were there. You find out in the flashback she actually tried to help you a little bit. And it's like, man, cut this bitch down. And you're keeping her around. And before you know it, God damn it, now I got feelings for her. Now she's part of the wolf pack and she becomes a trusted ally. And it's like, oh, that kind of like, that really changed my expectation of the game because I wanted revenge. I wanted blood. But looking at it all, you know, she was fighting her own fight and she was just conflicted as you were. And she was still trying to find out who she wanted to be. And this is Atsu's story first and foremost. Really nothing else mattered to me but Atsu. It's Atsu's story. So a lot of the tangential characters like Mad Goro, as funny as he is and goofy as he is, like he fades into another. He doesn't need a happy ending. He doesn't need an ending. He's just a goofball. We meet him. We move on to the next person. It's like, it's Atsu's life, right? This is her revenge story. I wanted her to kill Kitsune, but by the end, I appreciated that her wavering revenge and her crossing the names off the list and then burning the list was a growth of hers of like, hey, you know, my ultimate goal is what? Originally, it was revenge. It was to destroy the Yotei 6. It was to kill Saito. It was to end it at all costs. You know, it's the point that she leaves her brother behind for multiple times. You know, she ends up in rescuing him and she's like, I'm sorry, let's leave. And Jubei's like, this isn't you. And it's almost like he has to reconvince her of like why she's doing what she's doing. And it was like an interesting moment because up until then, she'd been so focused on revenge, but you could see that like her spending time with Kiku and, you know, that's where like the separation happens. That's where, you know, like up until then, I think she wore the mantle was her. She was the ghost. But then by the end, she could take the mask off and be human and put the mask on and become the ghost again. And I thought that was really, really cool. I thought that was a more powerful revenge mechanism than her just losing herself to just this insane, one-dimensional fight. Speaking of one-dimensional, Saito, Mr. Villain for villain's sake. I wasn't particularly thrilled with him. I thought he was a very weak villain. I think over time we learned to hate him because we see him being a just shit parent. Obviously, he murders our family. He's very, very abusive to those around him, particularly his two sons. He's just evil for evil's sake, but he doesn't really have any charisma or anything. He wasn't like a Joseph Seed of somebody who was like trying to, in his own weird way, like build up a cult of people around him. He was just a villain to be there. And I think if I had any massive criticism of the game, it was that he was just a very weak villain. He could have been so much more. If there was a reason behind his madness, if he had some weird belief of like, I'm doing this because I want to improve the land, or like a weird, like a Thanos almost. Like Thanos has a bad story. He's a bad dude. He does horrible things, but like you kind of relate to him. I never related to Saito. Never once. I never felt any compassion for him. I couldn't kill that bastard fast enough. And it was just a kind of a meaningless, hollow villain. Just he was a placeholder for anger. And I think the writers really did a massive disservice on making Saito matter more than he could have. I think his one-dimensionalness hurt the game. I wouldn't say it ruined it. Again, I think Atsu's journey is so interesting, and watching her grow and expand throughout the fights really overshadows everything. But I think Saito will be a cliff note in this game for years, down the road. We're not going to remember Saito as the main villain. The fact that Atsu kind of starts off as this almost like reluctant hero, and then grows into this, this legend where people kind of like, hey, there she is. Everybody's cheering for her, like, hey, she's gonna come kill everybody, and like she kind of grows into that role. It's cool, but she has help. Her horse and the wolf, depending on what you named them, obviously they're going to be different for you. The horse was an awesome companion. We chose to keep her original horse instead of upgrading on that very first quest. In my head, I like to think of, especially in the cutscenes where like, when she goes to sleep, she wakes up and she's like curled up against the horse. Like the horse was the one constant ally in this, which I appreciated. And I like that. Thankfully, the horse didn't get smoked. I was waiting for some sort of weird Shadow of the Colossus swerve or a Ghost of Tsushima swerve where like the horse doesn't make it. But the horse is just a trusty companion, and it was like a constant. It was interesting. It was just a tool in a sense, just for traversal. The horse doesn't really have any like hero moments, like the horse busts through the window and has a sword in his mouth or anything like that. But I just appreciated that they had, she had a constant companion with her, because a lot of people ebbs and flows. The other constant companion she had, which I really, really loved, which I didn't see it coming, was the wolf. If depending on how you played, and it'll be different for you and your playthrough. For me, the wolf was like a co-pilot. Started doing the wolf dens very early on. I realized it was an interesting thing. I love the wolf skill tree. As you continue to upgrade the wolf and continue to do the wolf dens, you get the Song of the Wolf, where you can play the shamisen and the wolf will appear to help you fight. While the wolf doesn't make an appearance in any of the boss fights, basically every pivotal moment leading up to a boss fight, for me, the wolf was present. Every standoff, you'd have me standing basically back to back with the wolf, doing double takedowns. I upgraded my takedown. I could take down 2 additional enemies and then shoot a third. The wolf would kill one, and then the wolf just stayed and fought with me. Sometimes when I was about to die, the wolf would come out of nowhere and res me, keep me alive. It was an awesome companion, and I loved that the wolf was like her bestial form. Like the wolf was, when she was like the ghost, the wolf seemed to be like a part of her. And I say that because at the very, very end of the game, when she's done, she basically has killed Saito. She's living her life. The wolf comes up and she's like, I'm not fighting with you anymore. And the wolf's like, cool, and like fades away. Wolf doesn't become docile. The wolf doesn't become her pet. The wolf is off to go kill. And I'd like to believe in my head that the wolf is like the spirit of vengeance somehow that's going to like the next person, just a forever companion to the next guy who's going through revenge tale. The wolf's going to show up and help them. I'd like to believe that. I love that ending for the wolf, and I think the wolf, to me, again, my play style of being very aggressive and just basically kicking in the front door, the wolf was there with me from the beginning. When my wife played, much more stealthy, taking her time, using the kunai and the bow and arrow, kind of clearing out and thinning out the herd a little bit more. Wolf wasn't as prevalent for her story, but for me and how I played, man, that was awesome. And that really cool shirt that I'm going to pick up where it's like half of her head and half of the wolf's head, like that was my story. And I love that. So massive shout out to the wolf. I thought that was so cool. I love when games have animal companions. I'm talking like a Fallout game with dog meat, where you have an animal who's with you, who kind of gets it. And I thought that was so well done. Atsu had other support roles as well. They referred to as the Wolf Pack. You can click through them and read about their bio. She makes a lot of friends along the way that, just by doing missions with them, she gains a lot of respect from people and earns their trust. And they help her in different ways, the map maker and the bounty hunter guy and Mad Goro, even in his own weird way. Even Saito's son turns on him, right? Becomes kind of sort of an honor member of the Wolf Pack. But the ones that, of course, the one that meant the most to her, Jubei. And the fact that Jubei was able to live a life after this tragedy and get married and have a child and basically rise up to the role of prominence in the clan that he was in was awesome. And I was happy for him. And that initial friction that they had was very interesting because Jubei was willing to let it go. He didn't want the vengeance to consume him. But obviously, Atsu had too much hate in her heart, and she couldn't let that go. And I loved the two of them, kind of that friction that they had early on. And then towards the end of the second fight, where they kind of unite and they kind of agree that, hey, listen, like Jubei kind of like, you almost like awaken the sleeping dragon in Jubei almost. And he's like, hey, you know what? You're right. Like, I'm going to help you do this. That was awesome. I really, really liked that, especially not knowing he had a kid then, and he was willing to basically put that away to help his sister was a really cool moment. And I think his arc was very, very well done. I was a bit disappointed after the second hunt. You really don't see him until the end. Obviously, the Kitsune comes in and she has a very, very significant role. I think probably more so than him, honestly. But it was interesting to see him come back and then to kind of, butt heads with her again. Like, hey, I thought we were done with this. And then he's the one ultimately to push her into like, hey, okay, now I need to go engage. The two of them fighting together back at home, fighting Saito one last time, was really, really cool. And I kept thinking in the back of my head, how cool would it have been if the wolf showed up and you had all three of them together, the trilogy. Or even four, bring in a Kitsune, right? We didn't get that, of course, but I thought that would have been a kind of neat little moment. Jubei clearly, wanting to do what's best for his daughter. He's the humanity side of this, right? He went through the same things that Atsu did, but he found a way to live his best life and become a father and a leader, as where Atsu is just an outsider and kind of filled her heart with hatred. He didn't have that. And I like the two elements between the two, but I would like to believe, I think a more interesting story probably would have been if Jubei was just as much of an asshole as Atsu was, and they were together just lost in vengeance. But he finds a way to like kind of bring her back. He's the human element to like, hey, take off the mask and be my sister and be an aunt to my child and be a member of this family. But it was sad that he ultimately dies at the end. But Atsu's promised that like, I'll take care of her. You could see he's at peace with that. Like that's all he really wanted. And in a weird way, like, he probably got closure knowing that like the vengeance was done, because I think it did. I think she kind of brought the dragon out in him, even though he kind of like suppressed it in her. I think I think some of her hatred kind of like bled into him, and they kind of both had a little bit at the end. But it was a very, very cool moment for him. And I really appreciated his arc. And then showing at the end, basically, with Atsu basically deciding to basically give up being the ghost and live in peace. She's got the shamisen. She's going to teach Kiku how to just live a normal life. They're going to go just live together, and there's no more weapons. There's no more revenge. It's over. They're just people now. That was cool. And it's reflected in the title screen. I love when games do this. We don't see this enough. I love that this game's title screen changed based on how you played. So every time you killed an enemy, obviously the tabard blowing in the breeze, you'd see the blood stripes through them, letting you know as you're making progress. And then you get to the end. She obviously burns that. She tells Saito she's found family. She doesn't need the revenge anymore. She gives up on the revenge, right? Saito, again, very one-dimensional, doesn't understand that, gives himself to the rage. She ends up successfully defeating him, killing him. Ta-da. But then at the end, at that loading screen, the tabard's gone, and it's just her mask hanging, and it's just like, I don't need this anymore. Like, I'm just going to put it over here and I'm done. And I love that. I love that she kind of gave it up. I was kind of almost hoping she would have buried the mask or smashed it. Like, that would have been the end. That would have been really like, hitting the nail on the head of the symbology, like Lord of the Flies kind of stuff, but I'll take what I can get. But I appreciated that, she did have that wavering revenge, but ultimately at the end, she kind of pivoted and found herself again. She didn't push everyone away. And I think that she got a very realistic resolution in that sense too. But overall, I will say that, I think this game was so well done. Graphics and design aside, the emotional impact of this, I think, really resonates. I think that she was the living embodiment of vengeance, and it was cool to watch her be a badass. But it was also very touching for her to basically give that up. And she kind of gets, I don't think there's a happy ending here. She watched her family get murdered. She watched her brother get murdered. She found family, but I don't know if she gets a happy ending. I think I liked this ending significantly more than Ghost of Tsushima. I felt it was much more warranted. I feel like Sucker Punch did a way better job of injecting more a story and personality into Atsu. If they decide to make another Ghost of game in the future, I hope that some of the lessons they learned are a boss that meant a little bit more, honestly, more complex story. And honestly, I think multiple protagonists probably would have helped, only because had Atsu been just pure hatred the entire game and her brother been the humanitarian the entire game, and they were together and you can play with them together, I think there's more fun in that conflict. I think in that conflict space, we always talk about this in management, the conflict space is where I want to put you. As a manager, I want you in that space, not to fight with you, but I want you to have to defend your ideas, and I want you to have to think outside the box. I don't want it to just be organic and just, I want it to be organic. I don't want it to just be automatic. It's in that conflict space where we get the best stories. It's in that conflict space where we get the most creative ideas. When your back's to the wall and you got to really think and dig, that's when that adrenaline kicks in and you come up with a better solution than you even thought you already had. So Atsu kind of did a lot of the heavy lifting for both her and Jubei's role, but I kind of feel like she could have potentially just stayed that way. But obviously it's not my game to tell. It's just my game to review. Amazing masterpiece of the game, world class, definitely one of the best I've played in a long time. It will be fondly remembered for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of deep dive review. I don't see a lot of people doing these kind of spoiler cast things, but I just wanted to give some thoughts and opinions on it. So I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. Feel free to go nuts in the spoiler. I already told everybody it's a spoiler video. So if you feel like one of my observations was off, or you feel like, the ending wasn't deserved, or Saito was the coolest villain you ever heard, I want to hear about those things. I know these long form videos are definitely some of my least popular ones, but I don't care. This is a special game to me, and I feel like this video needs to exist, so I made it. All right. Hey, thanks for watching, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Hope you enjoyed the commentary, And I'll see you in the next one. All right. Bye-bye.